Part 46. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 451. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Dimanche closed her eyes and nestled in Chen Tao's arms. She said, "The laws of the sanctuary have been revised. I have also revised the matters related to the relationship between men and women. In the future, girls don't need to go to the genetic exchange center. As long as they meet the boy they like, they can be together as long as they like each other." Dimanche slowly opened her eyes and looked at Chen Tao. She said, "The genetic optimization plan for humans has also been stopped. From now on, humans will have to rely on themselves if they want to reproduce children." She looked at Chen Tao and said, "Then, I say, dear." She looked at Chen Tao and said with a smile, "Are you planning to have a child?" Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at her and said with a smile, "I don't pursue this, but if you want to, I will work hard." He raised his hand and gently touched her cheek. Sensing Chen Tao's movements, Dimanche's eyes glowed with luster. She smiled, raised her little hand, and held Chen Tao's big hand. Chen Tao said, "After becoming the commander of the sanctuary, you have to be busy with more things. Thank you for your hard work, honey." Dimanche's eyes glowed with a hint of luster. She slowly closed her eyes and snuggled into Chen Tao's arms again. "Chen Tao, you are a god," Dimanche said. "You said that in addition to the planet I am on, there are other planetary civilizations with existences like ours. Are there any civilizations like mine in those planetary civilizations?" "It's the same as the planet we live on. There is a chaotic civilization because of unfair laws." Chen Tao said, "There are hundreds of millions of civilizations in the entire universe, and in those civilizations there are all kinds of rules and laws. After all, these rules and laws are all made by humans." He said with a smile, "There are not a few civilizations that are as chaotic as the sanctuary." Dimanche slowly opened her eyes and looked at Chen Tao. "Then did you go to help them?" Hearing this, Chen Tao shook his head and said with a smile, "The development of civilization has its own process, and chaos is inevitable." Dimanche looked at Chen Tao and said, "Then, what if civilization is destroyed because of this chaos?" Chen Tao gently stroked Dimanche's golden hair. When he heard Dimanche's inquiry, he looked at Dimanche subconsciously and said, "We have our own rules over there. Civilizations rise and fall. We will not participate, but if a foreign civilization invades, we will take care of it." Dimanche's eyes glowed a little, and she said, "In other words, even if civilization is destroyed, you won't care about it, right?" Chen Tao looked at Dimanche's beautiful big eyes and said, "Well, it's a pity, but if civilization destroys itself, we can only let it go like this." "Then why are you helping us?" Dimanche approached Chen Tao, raised her face and looked at Chen Tao. Eyes facing each other. Chen Tao looked at Dimanche and said with a smile, "Because you are in this civilization." He gently touched her cheek with his hand. Dimanche's eyes glowed with a glint, and she said, "In other words, you save my civilization entirely based on your own will. Isn't this bad?" Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Dimanche and said, "There is nothing wrong with it. There are many civilizations, and there are also many self-destructive civilizations. Just save one." Dimanche smiled, "You make and break rules, it's so random." Chen Tao smiled, "I don't think it's random. I broke the rules for you. In my opinion, you are much more important than a civilization." Dimanche closed her eyes, snuggled into Chen Tao's arms, and said, "How am I so important?" "For me, yes." Chen Tao slowly approached Dimanche and kissed her forehead. "Very pampering." Dimanche's eyes were glowing, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised, looking a little happy. Dimanche said softly, "How many days are you going to stay here this time?" "Leave in a while." There was a hint of disappointment in Dimanche's eyes, and she pursed her thin lips. Chen Tao said softly, "I will come back to you in a while." Well. Dimunsa pursed her thin lips and said, I'm also very busy during this period. If you want to find me, I'll be free in the evening. As soon as she had sex with a man, she invited him to come see her next night. Even though she said that, Dimantha couldn't help but blush. Chen Tao said with a smile, well, then I will come to see you at night next time and play with you. Dimantha's face turned red and she said, well, I'll wait for you. Although she was a little shy, Dimantha couldn't help but miss Chen Tao. Other side. Inside base number 1 of Earth Star. Li Xiaolu looked at the picture inside through the mirror. Through the picture, she saw endless air waves and flames whizzing past. A horrific nuclear war is erupting on this planet in front of us. Not long after, when the flames of the nuclear bomb dissipated, what Li Xiaolu saw through the mirror was ruins. All the cities and people built on the planet before were gone. Seeing this, Li Xiaolu's eyes trembled slightly, with a trace of tears in them. Did a civilization with hundreds of millions of people just die like this? Li Xiaolu's eyes glowed with a hint of disbelief. Although Li Xiaolu could observe the entire universe through this during this period, and she also saw a lot of things, the scene in front of her was a little hard for Li Xiaolu to accept. What's wrong? A voice came from beside him. Li Xiaolu was slightly startled, and she looked at He Yuxuan next to her. He Yuxuan was wearing a thin shirt. She stood up, sat on the bed, put her legs together, leaned against the head of the bed, looked at Li Xiaolu, and said with a smile, what's wrong? Li Xiaolu looked at the mirror and said, they are all dead. He Yuxuan also saw the devastated world like a sea of fire through the mirror. She said, what is going on? Li Xiaolu explained, nuclear bomb, this planet has just experienced a nuclear bomb war, all living things including previous humans have disappeared. Just now I watched a little girl go shopping with her mother to buy clothes. Li Xiaolu's eyes were filled with tears as she said, she was still happy, but as soon as the nuclear bomb exploded, she and her mother fell into disrepair. No more. He Yuxuan was slightly startled. She raised her hand and gently touched Li Xiaolu's back to comfort her. He Yuxuan said softly, this is how civilized things are. Many nuclear bomb civilizations cannot control their nuclear bombs. You will find that the rise and fall of civilization is just like the law of nature and cannot be reversed. He Yuxuan said, you have seen so many civilized things, why are you still sad so easily? Li Xiaolu pursed her thin lips and said softly, so many people who look like us, just disappeared. I know that the rise and fall of civilization cannot be changed, but, watching them die, my heart very uncomfortable. He Yuxuan looked at Li Xiaolu, she smiled and said, you can tell Chen Tao about this. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 452. Looking for a husband, Li Xiaolu subconsciously looked at He Yuxuan. He Yuxuan nodded slightly, and she said, this civilization has been destroyed, but there are hundreds of millions of civilizations in the universe. There must be many civilizations that are still under the threat of nuclear bombs. If you want to save other civilizations threatened by nuclear bombs, you can talk to Chen Tao. He Yuxuan smiled and said, although the dragon people don't like to care about the rise and fall of civilizations themselves, the destruction of a civilization is such a big thing that the dragon people will still intervene. As long as you tell Chen Tao will definitely take care of it. Really? Li Xiaolu's eyes lit up slightly. He Yuxuan nodded slightly. Li Xiaolu hummed, and she said, then I'll go find him. She got out of bed. Looking at Li Xiaolu's vigorous movements, He Yuxuan crossed her arms and smiled. On the other side, after Chen Tao comforted Dimantha, he went back to his room to rest. He lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, in a daze. During this period, I was a bit busy, and the things I was busy with were basically related to girls. However, such things also made Chen Tao happy. Just accompany the girls, That means the universe is peaceful. Chen Tao lay comfortably, closed his eyes, and was about to have a good sleep. Creaking. Suddenly the sound of the door opening drilled into his ears. Hearing this sound, Chen Tao was slightly startled, and he subconsciously looked at the door. A beautiful figure was standing at the door. It was Li Xiaolu. Li Xiaolu was wearing a t-shirt pajamas with a panda pattern. When she saw Chen Tao, her eyes lit up slightly. She trotted towards Chen Tao, came to Chen Tao, stood by the bed, and looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao looked at Li Xiaolu, he smiled, and patted the place next to him. When Li Xiaolu heard it, her face was slightly red, and she was also very obedient. She climbed up directly and snuggled in Chen Tao's arms. Chen Tao hugged her gently and said with a smile, "How did you find time to come? Don't you have classes today?" Li Xiaolu is still a student now. Although she has unlimited time, she still wants to go to class. For her, that is her life. "Today is Saturday, I don't have to go to class," Li Xiaolu said softly. Hearing this, Chen Tao hummed, and he said gently, "How are you doing at school?" "Well, it's okay." Li Xiaolu said, "Since my genes have been upgraded, I can remember the knowledge in school after reading it once." Chen Tao smiled and said, "Then the teacher must praise you as a genius." Li Xiaolu hummed and said, "At first, yes, and then I was afraid of attracting too much attention, so I deliberately made a few mistakes in the exam." Chen Tao smiled, but didn't say anything. This is a smart move by Li Xiaolu. If Li Xiaolu always gets full marks, it will definitely attract a lot of attention, which will inevitably affect her daily life, which is not a good thing. Li Xiaolu is very smart and deliberately made a few mistakes. That, Tao Li Xiaolu raised her head, looked at Chen Tao, and said, "Today I saw a planet that was destroyed by a nuclear bomb. There were hundreds of millions of humans on that planet, but in the blink of an eye, all of them died. In addition to humans, all the creatures were gone." Li Xiaolu's eyes were filled with tears, and she said, "I also saw a little girl. She was still young and didn't know anything. She didn't even have time to go to school. In the end, she was gone too. She was obviously innocent." Chen Tao looked at Li Xiaolu's expression, raised his hand, gently wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said gently, "That is related to the decision made by the forces in the civilization. However, if it was discovered earlier, I could have someone restrict it. It's a little late now." He gently hugged Li Xiaolu into his arms. Li Xiaolu's little head leaned against Chen Tao's chest, and her eyes were filled with tears. Chen Tao said gently, "Next time you can use your genetic ability to see the situation of that civilization. If a nuclear war really happens, tell me." Li Xiaolu hummed, "Okay." Looking at Li Xiaolu's delicate voice, Chen Tao said gently, "Which civilization and planet did you see before?" Li Xiaolu said, "This." A mirror appeared in front of him. Chen Tao looked at the mirror. This mirror was given to Li Xiaolu by Rose before. Through this mirror, Chen Tao can see a planet. This planet is devastated, and it looks red from the outside. The whole planet is like a sea of fire. Unlike stars, the flames of this planet are not generated by the planet itself, but by humans. It is the residual flames generated after the nuclear bombing that illuminate the entire planet. The picture zooms in and enters the interior of the planet. The planet is full of pits and pits. Inside, you can see the red land and flames, magma, etc. But no plants or creatures can be seen. This is a dead planet. Chen Tao frowned slightly when he saw this. There is absolutely no breath of living people on this planet. Is this what happens after an uncontrolled nuclear war? Chen Tao said, "The temperature of this planet has reached 500 degrees Celsius, and the air is full of nuclear radiation. In this environment, no creature can survive. This planet is now completely a dead planet." Well, Li Xiaolu said, yesterday I could still see children playing, but in one day, everything is gone. Chen Tao looked at Li Xiaolu's depressed look, his eyebrows slightly stretched, raised his hand, gently stroked her hair, and said with a smile, let's go. Li Xiaolu was stunned, she looked at Chen Tao, where to? Chen Tao smiled and said, you will know in a while. Chen Tao took Li Xiaolu out of bed together. With a thought, the two figures disappeared on the spot. Li Xiaolu came back to her senses, she looked around, and found that she was in the universe. She looked forward, and the scene she saw made her eyes tremble slightly. In front of Li Xiaolu was the planet that had become unrecognizable because of the nuclear bomb. Standing in the universe, looking at the planet in front of me, after seeing it with my own eyes, the shock was even stronger. Li Xiaolu subconsciously looked at Chen Tao beside her, her eyes were full of doubt. Tao. Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Li Xiaolu only felt a slight light in front of her eyes. The scene in front of her made Li Xiaolu's pupils tremble slightly. The planet in front of her, which was originally engulfed by flames, suddenly turned into a blue-green planet. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 453. The planet in front of us has changed from being as red as Mars to being blue and green. The blue is the blue of the sea and the green is the green of the forest. At this moment, the planet has become a planet full of vitality. The flame just now seemed to have never existed. Looking at the earth-shaking changes that happened to the planet in front of her in an instant, Li Xiaolu's eyes trembled slightly, and her mouth opened slightly, looking a little unbelievable. Li Xiaolu subconsciously looked at Chen Tao, did you do this? Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, he smiled and said, well, let's go in and take a look. As he said, Chen Tao raised his hand and hugged Li Xiaolu's waist. He flapped his wings behind him and took Li Xiaolu into the planet. When passing through the atmosphere, because of the extremely fast speed, the air rubbed, and a burst of fire came towards him in front. Chen Tao built a protective shield, and the protective shield was emitting flames. Chen Tao didn't care. After passing through the atmosphere, the figures of Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu fell to the ground. Li Xiaolu stepped on the soft grass. She looked around and saw the lush forests around her. She looked in disbelief. Voila! A bird flew up from the treetops, shaking the leaves and making a sound when they collided. Seeing this, Li Xiaolu's eyes trembled slightly. Chen Tao crossed his arms and looked at Li Xiaolu. He said, although the previous civilization can no longer be saved, I can save this planet. Now we just have to wait for time. This planet gave birth to a highly intelligent civilization, and it can definitely give birth to another highly intelligent civilization. Li Xiaolu hummed, and she looked at Chen Tao with a smile on her face. Thank you. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Chen Tao thought it was Li Xiaolu's voice, but when Chen Tao looked, he found that Li Xiaolu didn't say anything at all. Chen Tao was slightly startled, and he looked in the direction of the sound. In front of him, a girl in a pink dress stood there gracefully, staring at Chen Tao. The girl looked about 16 or 17 years old, with a pink and tender face and a tall figure. Her skin was as white as cream, and she looked like a carefully carved work of art, beautiful and moving. People. This planet was clearly a dead planet just now, with nothing on it. How come a person suddenly appeared now? Chen Tao said, who are you? The woman saluted Chen Tao and said, Lu 11, the Lord of Beihe, greets the Lord of Dragon people. Master, Chen Tao was slightly startled, and he looked at the woman. The woman said, I am Lu 11, the Lord of Beihe civilization. This blue star is located in Behi civilization and belongs to the civilization under my jurisdiction. Chen Tao looked at the girl in front of him, and he did not speak, but chose to contact others on the gene channel. Valia. I'm here, what's wrong? Valia's voice sounded in the gene channel. Chen Tao said, I met a master from the White River civilization. What is a master? Valia said, the universe is very large, and a small part of the civilization has improved its genes through technology and evolved into the second generation of genes. Warriors with the second generation of genes have surpassed mortals. They use that power to protect the civilization of a galaxy. Those people are called masters. The master of the White River civilization is a woman named Lu 11. How could you meet her? Is that so? Although the dragon civilization manages the entire universe, there are some places that are not managed by the dragon civilization. Those people naturally have their people to protect them. Are those people the masters? Chen Tao said, I happened to meet her. Lu 11 is a beautiful woman, and she is single. You have to be careful. Valia's voice came, and this sentence was a little intriguing. Chen Tao's mouth twitched and said, okay, I know. Well, I'm busy here first, so I won't say anything. Valia's voice sounded, and she hung up the communication. Chen Tao's eyes fell on Lu 11, and he said, why are you thanking me? Lu 11 said, Qingxing is the planet I manage, but the people of Qingxing fought day and night for their own interests, and finally launched a nuclear war, destroying the life of the entire planet. She said, I originally thought that this planet was hopeless, but I didn't expect to get your help as the king of dragon people and regain a new life. A planet with life is very rare. Qingxing was saved by you, so I want to thank you. Hearing this, Chen Tao nodded slightly and said, I understand. My thanks. There is one thing I don't quite understand. Li Xiaolu, the narrator, spoke out. Chen Tao and Lu 11 looked at Li Xiaolu together. Li Xiaolu looked at Lu 11 and said, since you are the master of this galaxy, you have the obligation to protect this planet, but knowing that this would happen, why didn't you help? Lu 11 looked at Li Xiaolu, her sapphire-like eyes glowed with a hint of light, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao smiled and said, this is my lover, Li Xiaolu. Hearing Chen Tao say that she was his lover in front of others, Li Xiaolu's heart was slightly sweet, and she looked at Lu 11. Lu 11 nodded slightly. She looked at Li Xiaolu and said, I have said that the national forces in this Qingxing are fighting every day. Their conflicts have reached an irreconcilable level. Even if I intervene, there is no way to stop it. If I want to forcefully interfere, I can't bear the nuclear bomb at present. If I am hit by a nuclear bomb, I will die. Li Xiaolu was slightly startled. Nuclear bombs can hurt you. Yeah. Chen Tao raised his hand and shook Li Xiaolu's shoulder. He said gently, Lu 11 is a second-generation genetic warrior. Nuclear bombs can pose a threat to her. She has tried her best. Li Xiaolu's eyes were shining. She raised her face and looked at Chen Tao. Her mouth opened and wanted to say something, but she closed it again. I guess she didn't know what to say. Looking at Li Xiaolu's expression, Chen Tao retracted his gaze and looked at Lu 11. He said, no need to thank you. I just want to help this planet recover its vitality. Lu 11 nodded slightly. She looked at Chen Tao and didn't speak. Chen Tao said, that's it, I won't bother you anymore. Lu 11 said, please feel free. Chen Tao looked at Li Xiaolu and said with a smile, let's go. Li Xiaolu nodded. Chen Tao took Li Xiaolu away from the planet. Lu 11 looked at the place where Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu disappeared, her eyes trembling slightly. Space wormhole transport, you can transport directly without building a wormhole. You are worthy of being the king of dragons. It's really high-tech technology. Lu 11's eyes were shining, thinking of the surprised face of the little girl just now after hearing that she would be threatened by a nuclear bomb. Lu 11 pursed her lips and said, I have stayed in the Bahi civilization for too long, and I have become a child at the bottom of the well? Can the strong people in the universe now completely ignore nuclear bombs? My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 454. With the efforts of the dragon people, the entire universe tends to be balanced. But there are countless civilizations in the universe, and various things are happening in each civilization all the time. On this day, Li Xiaolu held the mirror. Through the mirror, she discovered a civilization that was facing a powerful nuclear bomb threat. In one of the planets named Xia Yaxing. Xia Yaxing is now in the period of nuclear bomb civilization. During this period, all countries in Xia Yaxing are scrambling to build nuclear bombs. In one of the countries in Xia Yaxing called Sen Country. In Qinja City, the capital of Mori Kingdom. In a spacious room decorated with nobility and elegance. A woman wearing a black uniform was sitting at the desk. She had long blonde hair tied up, revealing a gorgeous face. The woman wears white gloves and black boots. She clasped her hands together, stared straight ahead, and said, "What's going on?" This woman is Qinja, the leader of Mori Kingdom. In front of Qingya, stood a black-haired woman in uniform, holding a data bag. This woman is Qingya's secretary. Jin Na looked at Qingya and said, "Last night, the Fire Nation's territory of Tinner Island was attacked by a nuclear bomb from the west. In one night, tens of millions of people on Tinner Island were all wiped out." Bang, along with a muffled sound, Qingya slapped her hand on the table. The whole table trembled. Qingya said angrily, "That bastard Marta. He openly violated the contract between nations and used nuclear bombs against other countries." Jin Na lowered her head and said, "Master, please calm down." Qingya said, "Calm down. How can we calm down? If the Western Kingdom uses nuclear bombs against the Fire Nation, the Fire Nation will most likely break the agreement and use nuclear bombs against the Western Kingdom. If this continues, a nuclear bomb war will break out and the entire planet will be destroyed." Qinja stood up and said, "Contact Huolei, the leader of the Fire Nation, immediately." Jin Na said, "Yes." Jinna left. Qingya sat on the chair again, her eyebrows furrowed tightly, and her brain was spinning crazily. On Tinger Island, tens of millions of people died. This must be an act of revenge. The West Country and the Fire Country have always had conflicts. The relationship between the two countries has long been filled with the smell of gunpowder. For a period of time, there was a high-ranking official in the West who had a high reputation in the West. The two countries had not been at war. He was the one who maintained the balance between the two countries. He was a peace-loving person. In order to make the two countries more peaceful, the official went to the Fire Nation to increase the friendship between the two countries through diplomacy. But that prestigious official was killed by the Fire Nation's people less than a day after he entered the Fire Nation. Less than a week has passed since that incident, and the West Country has given the Fire Country such a great gift. I remember Bias, who was killed on Tinner Island. Was it really revenge? Qingya frowned tightly. Qingya said, "Tens of millions of people died in the Fire Nation all at once. With the temper of Sun Hao, the leader of the Fire Nation, this matter is probably going to be difficult. We must talk to Sun Hao and let him calm down." Jin Na walked in and looked at Qingya. Qingya said, "How is it?" Jin Na said, "The Fire Nation has now entered a state of first-level war. I communicated with the Fire Nation's diplomats and told them that you wanted to contact Sun Hao, but the other party said that Sun Hao does not plan to meet with any other country now." Damn it! Qingya's face turned slightly pale. Ring, ring, ring. Jin Na's cell phone rang. She was slightly startled, took out her cell phone, then connected it and put it to her ear. Jin Na said, "Yeah, good." She hung up the phone. Qingya said, "Is it a matter with the Fire Nation?" Is Sun Hao willing to communicate? Jin Na shook her head and said, it's a matter on the Fire Nation's side, but it's not about communicating with us. The information just came in. Just 3 minutes ago, the Fire Nation dropped 3 nuclear bombs on Lihong in the Western Kingdom. Qingya took a breath, her face changed drastically, and she said, Fire Country, West Country, are they planning to directly ignore the agreement and start a nuclear war? Qingya hurriedly said, summon the heads of countries immediately. An hour later, Qingya sat in front of an oval table. On other chairs, you can see people made of virtual images. Those people are the heads of countries all over the world. Apart from the heads of the Western Kingdom and the Fire Kingdom, there were 7 people left in the room, including Qingya. Qingya stood up, looked at the remaining 6 people and said, I called everyone here this time to discuss the current war between the West Country and the Fire Country. Now our 9 major countries have signed an agreement. Explain who will use nuclear bombs to attack first. Then the first person to use a nuclear bomb will be retaliated by all our countries. Now the West is the first to use a nuclear bomb. Master Qingya, you can't say this about this, one of the men with the slicked back hair said. Biu, the younger brother of Mata, the leader of the Western Kingdom, went to the Fire Nation for the sake of peace between the 2 countries. As a result, he was killed by people from the Fire Nation. Assassination. The West is the party that advocates peace, but the Fire Country is the evil and hateful party. The West uses nuclear bombs, which are righteous nuclear bombs. It would be too strange for us to retaliate against a country that longs for peace, right? Yes, 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 the Lord of the Sea Kingdom is right, someone agreed. I also think the leader of the Sea Kingdom is right. Another person stood up and said, Lord of the Sea, I don't agree with what you said. The person who assassinated the Western envoy was not instigated by the Fire Country. Perhaps some countries wanted to provoke a world war and arranged such a person. How can we say that the war was provoked by the Fire Country? The matter is still unclear, and the Western country directly used nuclear bombs to attack. I think the person who assassinated Biu in the Western country may be someone from the Western country. Anyway, he continued, since the Western country used nuclear bombs, according to the agreement we made, they have to pay the price for what they did. Yes, Lord of the Earth country is right, someone echoed. I also think what the Lord of Earth said is right. The Lord of Sea frowned and said, you 3 countries have always been so close to Fire Country. Now you know it's Fire Country's fault, but you still speak for Fire Country. Haha, Lord of Sea, Lord of Earth said with a smile, it was not Fire Country that used the nuclear bomb first, but West Country. You are so close to West Country, and the sister of the Lord of West Country is your wife, so it's no wonder you would mention West Country. Qingya frowned suddenly. Qingya suddenly found that the other 6 people in the room, including her, had been divided into 2 camps, one standing on the side of West Country and the other on the side of Fire Country. The nuclear bomb agreement that was made before was like a blank sheet of paper at this moment, without any effect. No one could convince anyone in a meeting. The meeting had to be dispersed. Qingya returned to her office. She sat weakly on the chair, covering her head with her hands. It's over. Looking at Qingya's tired look, Jinnah said, Lord, what happened? Qingya raised her face, looked at the ceiling, and said, half of the world stands on the side of the Fire Country, and half stands on the side of the West Country. If the Fire Country and the West Country fight, all the countries in the world will be affected. This world war seems to be inevitable. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 455. Jin Na looked at Qingya and said, then, what should we do? Qingya said, if there is another world war now, it will be a nuclear bomb war. Our planet cannot withstand a nuclear bomb attack. If there is a nuclear bomb war, the entire planet will be completely destroyed. She frowned, looked away, looked at her white-gloved hands, and said, I hope the leaders of the countries will not be stupid enough to launch a full-scale war. Kinja put her hands together, held her nose with her fingers, and said, this is the only hope. I heard that a nuclear bomb war is about to break out here. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Hear this sound. Qingya was slightly startled, then she stood up suddenly and said, who? There was a man standing directly in front of Qingya. Qingya stood up and looked at the man, her eyebrows furrowed tightly. The man was wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. He was tall and thin, and looked quite handsome. Next to the man is a girl. The girl is dressed like the man. She wears a white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. The simple outfit fits the girl's slender figure and looks quite cute. The girl has a delicate face, and under the long and narrow eyelashes are a pair of large eyes, which are crystal clear. Kinja hadn't noticed there were two people in the room just now, but now they suddenly appeared. This made Kinja feel a little surprised and uneasy. If someone could sneak into her office in broad daylight, wouldn't it mean that if someone wanted to kill her, it would only take a thought? This is terrible. How did you get in? Kinja stood up and looked at the two people in front of her nervously. The man and woman were Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu respectively. Chen Tao looked at the tall woman in front of him and disappeared. Just disappeared into thin air. This strange scene made Kinja's pupils condense slightly. She looked closely, but she didn't expect Chen Tao's figure. Where are people? This doubt arose in her mind. But the voice sounded behind Kinja. Where are you looking? Qingya felt the hairs all over her body stand up, and she looked behind her. I saw Chen Tao looking over there with his hands folded across his chest. He looked at Qingya with a smile and said, I'm here. Kinja's pupils trembled. How is it possible? Qingya clearly saw this man right in front of her just now, but now this man has circled behind her in the blink of an eye. Let's not talk about how he disappeared out of thin air. Simply speaking, he moved to this distance at this moment. It's about 6 meters wide. In other words, if the man in front of him wants to kill her, he can do it with just one thought. Qingya's expression was a little more solemn. Guards, Jin Na, feeling threatened, immediately shouted. Qingya was startled and said, Jin Na. Bang! The desk door suddenly opened. 2 guards rushed in with guns drawn. Qingya said loudly, stop. The 2 guards were slightly startled. They looked at each other and Qingya. Qingya said, go out and no one is allowed to come in without my order. The 2 guards stood at attention together. Yes. The 2 of them went out together again and closed the door. Seeing this, Jin Na was stunned. She looked at Qingya and said, the Lord. Qingya glanced at Jin Na and said, if he wants to kill me, I'm already dead. Since I'm not dead, it means he doesn't want to kill me. There's no need to call in the guards. Jin Na was slightly startled. She nodded slightly and said, yes. Qingya looked at Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu, and said, who are you two? Why are you here looking for me? Chen Tao looked at the blonde beauty in uniform in front of him and said, let me introduce myself first. My name is Chen Tao, and I am the master of this universe. Qingya was startled, the master of the universe. Chen Tao looked at Qingya and said, don't know. Qingya looked at Chen Tao and said, I've never heard of it. Chen Tao said, I can explain to you that there is a civilization in this universe called the Dragon Man civilization. The Dragon Man civilization has its duty to protect the balance of the universe, and I am the king of the Dragon Man. The purpose of my coming here is also very simple. I heard that there is a nuclear bomb crisis here, and the planet will be wiped out by nuclear bombs at any time, so I came to take a look. Qingya's eyes were filled with a hint of surprise and confusion, and she said, what did you say? Are you from an alien planet? Chen Tao looked at Qingya and said, yes. Qingya looked at Chen Tao and said, If someone had said this to me an hour ago, I would have regarded him as a fool, but after seeing the ability you just showed, I have to face you squarely. That's what I said. Qingya said, as you said, our planet is facing an unprecedented threat from nuclear bombs. If this threat is allowed to continue, I am afraid this planet will no longer exist. She looked at Chen Tao and said, do you have a way to solve this matter? Chen Tao said, of course. Chen Tao can reshape a planet, and it is naturally easy to solve the problem of nuclear bombs on a planet. If Chen Tao wanted to, he could directly redefine the nuclear bomb in this world and make it ineffective in this world. But in this way, it will have a great impact on the subsequent process of this civilization. After all, nuclear bombs are also part of the process of civilization development. If nuclear bombs are redefined and all nuclear bombs cannot be detonated, then the progress of the civilization will stagnate, which is not what Chen Tao wants to see. However, it is also possible to temporarily redefine nuclear bombs. For Chen Tao, solving this matter is just a matter of thought. But Chen Tao is really bored staying at home, and now it is just the right time to take advantage of this matter to go out and have fun. Qingya looked at Chen Tao and said, what are you going to do? Chen Tao crossed his arms, looked at Qingya, and said, I plan to find their leaders and have a chat. Qingya frowned and said, the Lord of the West Country, Marta, and the Lord of the Fire Country, Sun Hao, those two have been blinded by hatred and anger. They will not stop just by chatting for a few words. Chen Tao said, chatting doesn't work, so kill them. What do you think? He can directly change a person's mind and turn that person into a puppet who listens to him, but this is not the practice of the Dragon People civilization, nor is it suitable for the Dragon People civilization. The rule of the Dragon civilization is that you can kill your enemies, but you can never use genetic abilities to change a person's mind. Qingya said, now is a sensitive period of conflict. If you kill their leader, it will be like throwing a match into a gunpowder barrel. It is estimated that both the Western country and the Fire country will directly throw out nuclear bombs, and then the planet will be destroyed faster. Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, he crossed his arms, thought for a while, and said, then I will try another method. He looked at Qingya and said, I will destroy all the nuclear bombs in your world. What do you think? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 456. Qingya was slightly startled, she frowned, and Chen Tao said, according to current estimates, there are tens of thousands of nuclear bombs stored in the planet. If they explode, they can destroy Xia planet dozens of times. What you want to destroy the nuclear bombs is to let them explosion. Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly. He looked at Qingya and said with a smile, I'm not that stupid. I can put away all the nuclear bombs. Collect, Qingya was startled, and she said, didn't you listen to me? There are tens of thousands of nuclear bombs on this planet. If you want to collect them, how long will it take? How long? Chen Tao looked at Qingya, raised his hand, raised an index finger, and said, 1 second. Qingya was stunned, her expression showed a hint of shock, 1 second. Chen Tao retracted his hand and said with a smile, well, just 1 second. Ring, ring, ring. Suddenly, Jin Na's cell phone rang. Hearing the sound, Qingya came back to her senses and looked at Jin Na. Jin Na picked up the phone and put it to her ear. She said, hello. As Jin Na listened to the words on the other end of the phone, her pupils suddenly widened. What? All the nuclear bombs are gone. How is this possible? Okay, I understand, I will tell the king. Jin Na suppressed her emotions, she responded to the other party, then hung up the phone, and looked at Qingya. Qingya looked at Jin Na. Qingya's face was full of disbelief. Jin Na looked at Qingya seriously and said, "Just now, the nuclear bombs disappeared. They said they disappeared out of thin air under the guard of soldiers." Qingya frowned and said, "How many nuclear bombs?" Jin Na looked at Qingya and said, "Everything. In just a few minutes, all the guards at the 6 places where we hid nuclear bombs received all the information. Everyone's nuclear bombs disappeared out of thin air." Qingya looked at Chen Tao subconsciously. "You did it?" Chen Tao crossed his chest with his hands, nodded slightly, and said, "Yes." Originally, Chen Tao wanted to find other methods, but now he can find another method. After all, if the nuclear bomb is put away, they will not have the capital to destroy the world. The nuclear bomb can be redeveloped later, but they have to wait until the nuclear bomb is developed enough to threaten Xia Yaxing. Quantity, it will take a while. The current nuclear bomb crisis has been resolved. But Chen Tao's move shocked Qingya. Qingya heard Chen Tao say that he was the master of the universe, but Qingya had no idea about the title Master of the Universe. In Qingya's opinion, the man in front of her was just an alien. Moreover, Qingya was still dubious about his alien identity. But Qingya never expected that while Chen Tao was speaking, all the nuclear bombs in her country were destroyed. To be precise, it was put away. This ability has completely surpassed Qingya's cognition. How can this be the method of aliens? This is simply a divine method. Qingya suppressed the shock in her heart. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "Are the nuclear bombs you put away our countries? What about other countries?" Chen Tao said, "The same goes for other countries. Now your entire planet no longer has nuclear bombs." Qingya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then Qingya looked at Chen Tao and said, "Thank you." Chen Tao was slightly startled. He looked at Qingya and said, "I treat you all equally. When I took away their nuclear bombs, I also took away your countries. Your country's losses are not small. Why do you thank me?" Qingya looked at Chen Tao and said, "Our country does not make nuclear bombs for use, but for deterrence. Only in this way, other countries will not underestimate our country and dare not bully our country at will. But the existence of nuclear bombs, it also makes me deeply uneasy. I have always been worried that nuclear bombs will harm this fragile planet. Now that you have taken away the nuclear bombs, my stress has completely disappeared." Chen Tao looked at the girl named Qingya in front of him and said, "Well, your words make me feel very happy." He looked at Qingya and said, "However, the nuclear bombs I put away are only what I have now. If they really want to start a nuclear war, they can make nuclear bombs again. And my time is limited. I won't be here forever, not now either. It's time to talk to the West Country and the Fire Country." Qingya was startled, then she nodded slightly and said, "Thank you." Chen Tao looked at Qingya and the tall and proud blonde beauty in front of him. Qingya was wearing a uniform, exuding a noble aura. She wore a pair of black high-heeled boots and a black leather skirt. Those slender legs were wrapped in black lace stockings. She has a cold face and a noble and elegant temperament all over her body, as if she is aloof and inviolable. There is a unique temperament of a superior person. This aura is very familiar. Chen Tao had felt a similar temperament in Kadi and Vilya. This was the temperament of a commander. Looking at the seemingly inviolable woman in front of him, his heart was itching, and he couldn't help but want to tease her. Therefore, he subconsciously approached the woman, raised his hand, pinched Qingya's chin, and raised her face. Qingya was slightly startled and looked at Chen Tao. Eyes facing each other. Chen Tao slowly approached Qingya. Qingya's eyes trembled slightly. He leaned close to her ear and said in a low voice, "If you want to thank me, you can't just say it. You can show it in action." At such a close distance, a male voice penetrated into my ears. Qingya's eyes glowed with a hint of luster. Kinja was born as a princess of this country. She had been high and mighty since she was a child. She had never experienced such a thing. Being flirted with by a man was something she had never thought about. But now that she was flirted with, facing this completely unexpected thing, Kinja couldn't help but feel her heartbeat speed up and her face getting hot. Chen Tao smiled and said, "Let's go." As Chen Tao's voice fell, his figure disappeared with Li Xiaolu beside him. Kinja came back to her senses. She looked at the place where Chen Tian disappeared. Her eyes were shining and she gently pursed her thin lips. She was thinking about what Chen Tao meant by that sentence. "Lord," Jinnah asked. Kinja came back to her senses and looked at Jinnah. Jinnah asked cautiously, "Lord, are you okay?" Kinja said, "It's okay. I was just thinking about what he meant by that sentence just now. He asked us to thank you with actions. What does this sentence mean?" Jinnah was startled. Her eyes were shining and she said, Isn't this meaning very clear?" At this point, Jinnah's face couldn't help but blush. Kinja frowned, "Understand? Do you know what he meant?" Jinnah blushed, and she said, "Well, he just likes you, the king, so he wants you to serve him." Speaking of this, Jinnah's face turned red. Kinja was stunned. She finally realized what Chen Tao meant by that sentence. Her face turned red. She thought seriously, "He is very special. If it is him, it might be a good choice for me to serve him." My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 457. In the capital of the western country, Marta City. In a bedroom decorated like a little girl's room, a girl lies on a big bed. The girl looks less than 14 years old, wearing a thin pink nightgown, and lying on it with a pink doll in her arms. The girl has long pink hair, tied in two ponytails, a delicate face, small arms and legs, and looks very cute. Standing beside the bed is a woman in a black uniform. The woman looks at the girl with respect and says, "Lord, just now the fire country dropped 3 nuclear bombs on our Lihong." The girl lying on the bed is the lord of this country, Marta. And the one who is speaking now is Marta's secretary, Bai Shui. When the girl heard this, she puffed up her cheeks and said, "Damn Fire Nation, they killed my brother and dared to use nuclear bombs against our country. Order the military commander Stu to bomb the capital of Fire Nation." Bai Shui's expression did not change at all. She said, "Lord, the capital of Fire Nation, Hualien, is too far away from us and is not within the range of nuclear bombs. If you want to bomb Hualien, you need to transport the nuclear bombs into the territory of Fire Nation before you can use them. This is common sense." Marta bit her thin lips. She got up, sat at the head of the bed with the doll in her arms, stared at Bai Shui and said, "I don't care. You gave a death order to Stu. No matter what, I will bomb the capital of Fire Nation. I will kill Sun Hao. Revenge for my brother." Hearing this, Bai Shui looked at Marta. She nodded slightly and said, "Yes." After that, Bai Shui turned and left. Marta looked at Bai Shui's back as she left. She bit her thin lips and said, "Damn Fire Nation." She bit her thin lips tightly in anger. Bai Shui went out and the door closed slowly. She stood at the door and fell into silence. Marta is 19 years old this year. The reason why she is still a little girl now is because of a failed experiment. After the experiment failed, her age and thinking seemed to be frozen, and she has always been a little girl. If it weren't for Marta's younger brother Bias, who has been assisting Marta with all his strength, this country would have been ruined long ago. Now that Bias is dead, no one can persuade Marta. She can only follow Marta's will. In this hereditary country, even if Marta is stupid and naive, she is the head of the country, and the people in the country can only listen to her. Bai Shui picked up the phone with a helpless mood, and was about to convey Marta's order to her subordinates. As soon as she picked up the phone, it rang suddenly. Bai Shui was startled. She looked at the phone number and found that it was the military commander Stu calling. Bai Shui answered the phone, put it to her ear, and said, "Commander. In just 5 minutes, all the nuclear bombs in our country disappeared out of thin air." Stu's heavy voice came. Bai Shui was startled. Disappeared out of thin air. Stu lowered his voice and said, "Yes, there are 3 places where we hide nuclear bombs, and soldiers are stationed at all times in these 3 places, and they are monitored by cameras at the same time, but just 5 minutes ago, all the nuclear bombs disappeared out of thin air. It's like they evaporated and disappeared without a trace." How is this possible?" Bai Shui's expression was full of disbelief, and her eyebrows were tightly furrowed. Stu said, "I don't understand what's going on. I have a video here. I'll send it to you. You can show it to the Lord." Bai Shui nodded solemnly and said, "Okay. The nuclear bomb disappeared, and disappeared out of thin air. Is this true?" "Impossible." Bai Shui's first thought was that Stu had done something. Stu didn't want to see a full-scale nuclear war break out, so he deliberately tampered with the nuclear bomb. But this idea was immediately dispelled by Bai Shui. Everyone knows Stu's loyalty. He will unconditionally obey Marta's orders. Even if Marta asks Stu to blow up Xiaoyaxing with a nuclear bomb now, Stu will do it immediately. Such a person would never betray Marta. But it shouldn't be. Bai Shui couldn't figure out what kind of power made the nuclear bombs of the whole country of 11 evaporate in an instant. This is too strange. Let's tell the king about this. Thinking of this, Bai Shui walked to the door and was about to open it. But suddenly, Bai Shui heard a voice in the house. "Let me go, who are you? Don't do this." It was Marta's voice, and this unique lowly voice was full of panic. Hearing this voice, Bai Shui's face changed drastically. She held the door handle and tried to push the door open. But she was surprised to find that the door couldn't be pushed open at all, as if it was blocked by something. Bai Shui panicked. She looked at the guards around her and said, "Guards, the king is in danger, open the door." When the guard heard this, he hurried over. He tried to push the door like Bai Shui, but it didn't work. He banged the door hard, but it didn't move. The door was like a 1,000-pound iron door at this moment, and it couldn't be shaken at all. When Bai Shui tried every means to open the door. 2 minutes ago, Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu appeared in Marta's room. When Chen Tao arrived in this room, he saw a moving beauty. Chen Tao thought that Marta, who had just launched a nuclear bomb, would be a shrewd and cold man. But when Chen Tao saw Marta's true face, he was stunned. Next to this place is a pink bedroom. This bedroom is decorated like a princess's castle, all pink and dreamy colors. And the big bed in front of me is also a little girl's room. On the big bed, there is a little girl lying. The little girl is wearing a pink nightgown, the thin fabric fits her slender figure, and the white stockings wrap her slender white legs. She has pink hair, healthy and smooth. This hair color is very natural, it seems that it is not dyed, but born like this. Her skin is as white as cream, very delicate. People often say that the skin is like that of a baby, and they are talking about the girl in front of her. She is lying on her side, holding a photo frame in her hand, and there is a photo in the photo frame. There are 4 people in the photo, a middle-aged couple, a little girl and a little boy. The girl's eyes are full of tears. Although the ruler of the Western country is a little different from what Chen Tao imagined, through the information Chen Tao obtained from Xiaoyaxing, he can be sure that the ruler is this girl. Chen Tao said, "Hello." Hearing the voice, Marta came back to her senses. She frowned, got up quickly, sat on the bedside, leaned against the bedside, looked at Chen Tao, and was stunned. "Who are you?" Chen Tao crossed his arms, looked at Marta, and said, "It doesn't matter who we are. We came here to communicate with you. I want you not to use nuclear bombs." Marta frowned and said, "Are you messengers sent by the fire country? You killed Bias and want me not to use nuclear bombs. You wish." Looking at Marta's puffed face and angry look, Chen Tao touched the back of his head and smiled and said, "It seems that I need to teach you a lesson." He snapped his fingers. Two silver chains appeared out of thin air and flew towards Marta. Marta's pupils condensed. "Let me go, who are you? Don't do this. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 458. Marta was tied to the bed with two silver chains. Her face turned pale, she looked at Chen Tao in surprise and uneasiness, and said, "Who are you?" Marta was surprised, she had to be. The chain she just saw appeared out of thin air and tied her up suddenly and automatically. This scene was too weird. Chen Tao's eyebrows relaxed slightly. He looked at Marta and said, "I said, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you should give up on this nuclear bomb war." Marta bit her lower lip and said, "Unless my brother is resurrected, this matter will not be over. The Fire Nation will definitely pay the price for what they have done. The Fire Nation has repeatedly bullied our country, and I have been enduring it. Its bias advise me not to be angry, and let me put peace first. I have always put peace first, but look at what the people of the Fire Nation have done. He killed it. Unless Bias is resurrected, the Fire Nation must pay the price for what it has done." Marta said angrily. Chen Tao fell into silence as he watched the delicate girl in front of him speak out her words of revenge. The Marta in front of her looked younger than Li Xiaolu next to Chen Tao. When she spoke, she was also coquettish and had a bit of a Lolita sound, but her words were filled with hatred for the Fire Nation. Tao Li Xiaolu's voice came from beside him. Chen Tao turned his face slightly and looked at Li Xiaolu. Li Xiaolu's eyes revealed a hint of pleading, and she said, "Don't hurt her." Chen Tao was slightly startled. Why did Li Xiaolu say this? When Chen Tao thought about it, he understood. When he was chatting with Qing Ya, he said that he should first chat with the leaders of the Western Kingdom and the Fire Kingdom. If he couldn't get through, he would kill them. "Even if you kill me, I won't change my decision." Marta frowned, her expression remained stubborn even though she was tied up in chains. Chen Tao looked away, looked at Marta, and said, "I won't kill you, but I have a question to ask you." Marta was slightly startled. She looked at Chen Tao, "If I answer you, will you let me go?" When Chen Tao heard this, his eyebrows slightly stretched and he said, "No." Marta snorted and said, "Then why should I answer you?" Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Marta. Looking at Marta's stubborn look, he crossed his arms over his chest and slowly sat down. When he sat down, a chair was generated under Chen Tao's butt. He sat on the chair, crossed his legs, looked at Marta, and said, "Let me ask you, do you want everyone in this world, including yourself, to die together?" Marta was slightly startled. She frowned suddenly, looked at Chen Tao, and said, "What do you mean? My revenge is only against the Fire Nation." Chen Tao looked at Marta and said, "As soon as you use this nuclear bomb, the Fire Nation will also use nuclear bombs. In this way, the entire world's nuclear bomb agreement will be directly invalidated. Now there are direct interests between the countries in your world, and your two countries. If the war breaks out, then there will be a world war. If the nuclear bomb agreement is invalidated, then the world will see a nuclear bomb war. How many nuclear bombs do you think Xia Yaxing can withstand now?" Marta frowned. Chen Tao said, "You don't need many. Now Xia Yastar has an increased greenhouse effect due to the influence of the environment. If there are a few more nuclear bombs, the greenhouse effect will be more severe. Even if the people of Xia Yastar do not die in the hands of nuclear bombs, they will be killed next, steamed alive in the hot weather. Added nuclear radiation and other factors." Chen Tao looked at Marta and said, "As long as you two countries fight, this planet will become a Death Star and you will die. Marta's little face turned pale slightly, and she said, "Impossible. What you said are just inferences and assumptions. My goal is only the Fire Nation. As long as the Fire Nation is destroyed and I avenge Bias, I will just stop." Chen Tao looked at Marta coldly and said, "You have destroyed Tinger Island and killed tens of millions of people. Among those people are little girls, relatives, older brothers, and younger brothers. And those people are innocent." "No," Marta said, "as long as you are from the Fire Nation, no one is innocent." Marta's clear eyes were full of anger. The pigment in the pupils of people on Marta's side is not the black that is common on Earth stars, but deep pink, or should be called rose. Through these rose-colored pupils, Chen Tao could feel Marta's anger. Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly and he said, "I think you need to calm down." He got up. Suddenly, the corners of his clothes tightened slightly. Chen Tao was slightly startled. He looked at Li Xiaolu beside him. Li Xiaolu looked at Chen Tao nervously and held the corner of Chen Tao's clothes in his hand. Chen Tao smiled, raised his hand, and gently stroked Li Xiaolu's hair. He said softly, "Don't worry, I won't kill her." Li Xiaolu's eyes were filled with luster. Chen Tao looked at Marta and said, "Let me take you to a place." The words just fell. The figures of Chen Tao and the three disappeared in the blink of an eye. When she appeared again, Marta was slightly startled. She suddenly found herself being held in this man's arms. In an instant, all the cells in Marta's body jumped, and something rolled out of her throat. Ah, that was her scream. Who is Marta? She is the noble head of the Western Kingdom. She has been aloof since she was a child. No matter who the men are, when they see her, they have to stand 3 meters away from her and salute her. Where has Marta been hugged by a man? As soon as she felt the man's body temperature, Marta felt like she was embraced by fire. She screamed and struggled, "Let me go. Let me go. Rude pervert, let me go." "Shut up," Chen Tao suddenly spoke. The voice was cold, but majestic. Marta was frightened by the cold and majestic voice. She didn't dare to move. She looked at Chen Tao in panic. Marta looked and found that Chen Tao was looking down with a cold face. Marta looked down along Chen Tao's line of sight. The scene she saw made Marta's pupils tremble slightly. There was a city below, but there was a huge pit in the middle of the city. The buildings next to the pit had become ruins. Not far from the ruins, there were human corpses lying one after another. The debris of broken hands and feet was all over the ground. Those corpses included men, women, young, and old. The scene in front of her was simply purgatory. Looking at the purgatory in front of her, Marta's pupils trembled slightly. "Where is this?" Chen Tao said lightly, "Tinger Island, this is the Dinger Island of the Fire Country, where you ordered the nuclear bomb to be dropped." Marta's face turned slightly pale, and her pupils trembled. For Marta, the people of the Fire Country were enemies, and it didn't matter how the enemies died, but when Marta saw the tragic scene she had caused, she felt something completely different. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 459. Marta is 19 years old this year. She was a princess of the Western Kingdom when she was born. She grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth. Her daily life was in that castle, and she barely stepped out of the castle. She had never seen a dead person, let alone a corpse. All her knowledge only comes from books. I have never seen such a purgatory-like scene like this, looking at those horribly severed limbs and looking at those unrecognizable corpses. Marta turned pale, feeling emotions she had never experienced before. These are all made by me. These are all made by me. This thought rang in Marta's mind. All kinds of emotions came over me. Marta's mind went blank. Chen Tao said, people in the Fire Nation are just like you, they are all human beings. Although they were born in the Fire Nation, they are innocent. Chen Tao looked at Marta and said, you have killed too many people. It's time to calm down. I didn't mean it. Marta's eyes were filled with tears. She suddenly hid her face in Chen Tao's arms and said, I really didn't mean it, Weevu. Marta choked and cried in Chen Tao's arms. Weevu, I just want revenge. Bias died in the Fire Country. I just want revenge. I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't intend to turn this place into purgatory. Marta cried, she cried like a child. Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he looked at Marta. Looking at Marta crying, her face was full of pear blossoms. Crashed. Has she collapsed? After all, Marta is just a little girl, and a little girl who has been locked in a cage. She had never seen a dead person, and she had never seen such a purgatory scene. Marta was horrified. She grabbed Chen Tao's clothes and tried her best to hide her face in Chen Tao's arms, as if she was about to hide it. Seeing Marta's emotional breakdown, Chen Tao realized that Marta's psychological acceptance was a little weak. He could only choose to go back to the bedroom. The three of them returned to the bedroom. Chen Tao looked at Marta. The chains on Marta's body have disappeared, and now Marta is holding Chen Tao's clothes tightly, leaning her little face on Chen Tao's chest, crying bitterly. Whoa! Chen Tao wanted to let Marta down, but looking at Marta's current situation, Chen Tao could only suppress his emotions and sat by the bed. Martin naturally snuggled into Chen Tao's arms, but she was still crying. Chen Tao touched Marta's back, trying to comfort her, and said, what happened has already happened, and regret can't change anything. As long as you don't use nuclear bombs again and do that kind of inhuman thing, it will be fine. He tried to make his voice gentler. Marta's choking slowly stopped, and she raised her little face, her rose-colored eyes filled with tears. She looked at Chen Tao, is that okay? Chen Tao looked at Marta's tear-filled eyes and her pear-shaped face. At this moment, this stubborn and tough girl became pitiful and looked very fragile and helpless. Who is so cruel? To actually let such a young girl become the head of a country. Chen Tao raised his hand, gently touched Marta's cheek, and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. I felt the roughness coming from the man's big hands. Marta, who felt extremely empty at the moment and longed for help from others, subconsciously put her face close to Chen Tao's hand. Chen Tao was slightly startled, because of Marta's small move, his big hands naturally held her little face. Chen Tao looked at Marta's tearful eyes, which were full of expectation, looking forward to redemption and forgiveness. Look at Marta's expression. Marta's words turned tens of millions of people on Tinner Island into corpses. Even if they survived, the cells in their bodies would be affected by nuclear radiation. Marta is a sinner. Is Chen Tao qualified to declare Marta innocent? Have. Chen Tao is the Lord of the universe. No one is more qualified than him. Chen Tao looked at Marta and said, you are guilty, but I forgive you. Marta was startled. She was stunned and looked at Chen Tao, I killed so many people, can I be forgiven? Before, Marta had thought about killing everyone in the Fire Nation. But after seeing the hell on earth she had created by herself, Marta completely changed her view. Chen Tao looked at Marta's eyes that were filled with tears and hope. Chen Tao showed a smile and said, however, others will not forgive you, but I forgive you anyway. Marta looked at the handsome smiling face in front of her, and when she heard what Chen Tao said, she felt as if she was being embraced by the warm sun, with warmth permeating her whole body. After seeing the purgatory created by her own hands, Marta felt deeply that she had sinned deeply and longed for forgiveness. Chen Tao's words were enough to shock her soul. Why? Why can you forgive me? I obviously killed so many people, Marta asked confused. Chen Tao looked into Marta's eyes and said firmly, there is no reason. You don't need a reason to forgive someone. Do you want a reason? The reason is that Chen Tao has softened his heart. The girl in front of me is so stupid, but even more stupid is this country. Marta is an immature little girl. If such a little girl says something, the country will follow it, but no one will stop her. This country is simply too scary. If there were sins, Marta had them, but the country's sins were greater. Marta can change, and after she realizes the seriousness of the matter, she also understands that what she did was wrong. She is just a little girl, and it would obviously be unfair for her to have to bear such a heavy sin. Therefore, instead of using the pressure of the sin to kill Marta, it is better to forgive Marta and let Marta change her ways. Marta's eyes trembled. Looking at the face in front of her, Marta's eyes were a little crazy. Are you a god? Marta asked one word at a time. Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly. He looked at Marta, smiled, and said, what do you think? After the words fell, a pair of pure white wings spread out behind Chen Tao. When Marta saw the pair of pure white wings, her eyes trembled slightly, and there was a hint of shock on her face. Marta couldn't help but raise her face and look at Chen Tao. God. Chen Tao slowly stood up and put Marta on the bed. He looked at Marta and said, I believe you now know the seriousness of the matter. You are the leader of this country. I hope you can change well. After the words fell, Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu disappeared from Marta's sight. Marta was startled for a moment, looking at the empty room in front of her. She couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Bang! Suddenly, Marta heard the sound of the door being kicked open. Marta was startled and looked towards the door. Only 5 guards were seen rushing in with guns. Bai Shui followed behind. Bai Shui looked at the situation in the bedroom. She hurriedly ran to Marta and said, Master, I just heard some noise inside and asked people to kick the door, but the door just couldn't be opened. Master, are you okay? Marta was slightly startled. She slowly raised her hand and wiped the tears on her face. She said, I'm fine. Seeing the tears on Marta's face, Bai Shui was stunned. She frowned and said quickly, Guards, look. Find the thief who dares to sneak into the king's room. Yes. Forget it, Marta said. Bai Shui was startled, and she looked at Marta, the Lord. Marta took a deep breath, calmed down her emotions, and then said to Bai Shui, I asked you to cancel the mission of using nuclear bombs to bomb the Fire Nation's capital. Bai Shui was slightly startled, she was a little confused. She said, yes. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 460. Inside the Fire Nation capital. A man with red hair sat at an oval round table. Around this round table sit several images composed of 3D simulation technology. Marta, the leader of the Western Kingdom, is a golden bird who is kept in a cage and doesn't understand anything. The man in the image said, the Western Kingdom, a country like her, is managed by a golden bird like her who doesn't understand anything. It's such a pity. Lord Sun Hao, now that Marta is the first to launch a nuclear war, we have an excuse to do it. When do you think we will do it? The red-haired man was Sun Hao, the leader of the Fire Nation. Sun Hao was wearing a black uniform and black gloves. He put his hands together, looked at the man who spoke, and said, I have given the Western Kingdom a return gift before, and I don't intend to be too tough on this matter. Although the Western Kingdom is my fire country, a big enemy, but the number of nuclear bombs that the Western Kingdom possesses is enough to destroy Xia Yaxing. If that woman is angered, the consequences will not be easy for anyone. What do you mean, the person who killed Bias was not sent by you? Someone expressed doubts. Sun Hao said, I'm not that stupid. If I really wanted to get rid of Bias, I wouldn't be stupid enough to get rid of him in my own country at such a sensitive moment. But the West country is too bullying. They actually dropped a nuclear bomb directly on Tinger Island, killing tens of millions of people. His face was gloomy. Seeing Sun Hao's expression, the people looked at each other, and then looked at Sun Hao. Then the leader of the Fire Nation plans to handle this matter. Sun Hao adjusted his mood slightly and said, "Let's see the reaction of that silly woman first." As soon as Sun Hao finished speaking, a female secretary next to her finished answering the phone. The female secretary's face turned pale slightly. She approached Sun Hao and whispered a few times in Sun Hao's ear. Sun Hao's pupils condensed slightly and his face changed slightly. "I have something to deal with here, so I'll take my leave first." This was originally what Sun Hao was going to say, but what puzzled Sun Hao was that it was not him who spoke, but another man. After the man finished speaking, the image disappeared. "I'll take my leave now too." As the sound rang out, the images in the entire room disappeared one after another, leaving only Sun Hao himself. When Sun Hao saw this, his eyebrows wrinkled slightly. He stood up and walked away. He walked out the door, stopped, looked at the secretary beside him, and said, "The nuclear bomb disappeared." The female secretary nodded and said, "Yes, I heard that it disappeared out of thin air. We had guards watching us at the time, and then suddenly disappeared." "How is that possible?" Sun Hao frowned. The female secretary picked up the tablet in her hand, handed it to Sun Hao, and said, "The camera we installed in the nuclear bomb depot recorded what just happened. This is the video from the Ministry of Military Affairs." Sun Hao took the tablet and opened the video to take a look. "I saw a warehouse containing nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs one after another are piled up in the warehouse. Guards stood inside the warehouse wearing uniforms and holding rifles. Some guards were patrolling. At this moment, something strange happened. The nuclear bombs placed high on the shelf suddenly disappeared. Just disappear into thin air." Seeing this scene, Sun Hao frowned tightly. The moment he saw the video, Sun Hao felt that the video might have been edited, but Sun Hao knew that it was impossible for the Ministry of Military Affairs to do such a thing. It was ridiculous for a nuclear bomb to disappear out of thin air, but Sun Hao had to believe that it really happened. Sun Hao frowned, thought for a moment, and said, "What the hell is going on?" While talking, Sun Hao and the female secretary entered the office. Sun Hao sat at his desk, handed the tablet to the female secretary, and said, "Let someone investigate." The female secretary nodded, "Yes." The female secretary turned and left. Sun Hao was the only one left in the office. Sun Hao frowned, thinking about what was going on. "Magic," Sun Hao said subconsciously. "That's not magic," a voice sounded in the room. Hearing this voice, Sun Hao's pupils froze slightly. He stood up suddenly and said, "Who?" He opened the drawer and took out a pistol. Suddenly, he saw a man and a woman appearing out of thin air in front of him. "It is Chen Tao and Li Xiaolu." Seeing the two people appearing out of thin air in front of me, Sun Hao's pupils condensed slightly. He raised his hand, pointed the gun at Chen Tao, and said, "Who are you?" Sun Hao's expression was a little more solemn. While talking, Sun Hao said, "Guard, guard." He immediately called for help. But there was no movement at all outside. Chen Tao had just programmed a sound insulation system to isolate this room, so that his voice could not be transmitted outside at all. Chen Tao crossed his arms across his chest, looked at Sun Hao, and said calmly, "This room has been isolated by me, and your voice cannot be heard outside." Sun Hao frowned. Sun Hao was very confused. The man in front of him could still speak so calmly when he was pointed at with a pistol? Sun Hao adjusted his mood. Now he was holding a pistol in his hand, and the muzzle of the gun was pointed at the enemy in front of him. He also gained the courage and said calmly, "Who sent you here? What is the purpose of sneaking here?" Chen Tao looked at the person in front of him, his eyebrows slightly stretched. I'm not used to answering questions, I prefer to ask questions. Shut up, Sun Hao snorted coldly. He pulled the barrel of the gun, opened the safety of the pistol, stared at Chen Tao and said, "Now I ask, you answer. If the answer dissatisfies me, then you will die here." Chen Tao was startled. He didn't expect that the guy in front of him would think he could kill him just because he had a pistol in his hand. Chen Tao looked at Sun Hao and said, "Don't you think the way I appeared is a bit magical?" In theory, normal people would definitely think that Chen Tao was a god when they saw him suddenly appear. If there was such a cognition, Sun Hao would not think that his gun could have any effect on Chen Tao. Sun Hao frowned. Invisibility technology, I haven't heard of any country opening up this technology. In other words, are you an assassin from a country with high technology? Sen country? Or 11 country? Oh. Chen Tao understood now. No wonder Sun Hao was a little surprised at first when he saw him. Now Chen Tao understood. Sun Hao thought that Chen Tao used invisible technology to get in. Chen Tao's eyebrows slightly relaxed. He looked at Sun Hao and said, "You are right to think that I got in with high-tech means. However, you are wrong to think that you can hurt me with just a pistol." "Really?" Sun Hao frowned and said, "Then let me see if it is the same as you said." Sun Hao was not scared. Hearing Chen Tao's words, he pulled the trigger directly. Bang! Accompanied by a gunshot and sparks from the muzzle, a bullet shot out and shot at Chen Tao. Clang! The bullet landed on Chen Tao, causing a burst of sparks. Chen Tao had no injuries on his body, and even his clothes were not touched. In fact, when the bullet was about to touch Chen Tao's body, it was blocked by a transparent protective shield. Of course, even if this bullet hit Chen Tao, it would not hurt Chen Tao. Chen Tao just didn't want his clothes to be torn. Sun Hao's pupils condensed slightly, he pulled the trigger, and the bullet shot at Chen Tao crazily.